The morning heat pressed heavy over Fort Sandridge. It shimmered in waves off the desert floor, even though the sun had just cleared the horizon. The air was a cocktail of dust, sweat, and the sharp scent of burned powder from the practice ranges. Rows of recruits assembled with polished rifles and gleaming optics, their expensive scopes shining like jewels under the Nevada sun. The chatter was loud, a mix of bragging rights and technical jargon. On the edge of the group stood Avery Kincaid. She carried a standard-issue rifle, but at her side hung an old leather case, its strap cracked with age. It held her grandfather's spotting scope. Its brass edges were tarnished green, the glass dulled by decades of handling. It was an artifact among sleek carbon fiber and digital displays. Tyler Voss saw it first. He nudged his friend, Ethan Drake, and barked a laugh that cut across the firing line. "What is that?" "A museum piece," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Drake leaned in, grinning. "Careful, Tyler. Touch it and you'll catch history dust. Might crumble before she even gets it on the tripod." The circle of recruits laughed on cue. Rachel Harper, with a tilt of her head, offered a piece of advice, not unkindly. "You should borrow a spare scope from supply," she said. "That thing can't possibly hold zero." Avery didn't respond. With steady hands, she planted the tripod in the dirt. The worn screws creaked as she mounted the old scope. Her silence was sharper than any retort. Sergeant Nolan barked the command to pair up. Shooter and spotter teams would rotate across increasing distances. Today's scores would determine who advanced to specialized training. Avery was partnered with Aaron Patel, a quiet and serious recruit who eyed her scope with hesitation but said nothing. At the 600-meter line, steel targets shimmered in the haze. Patel lay prone, aligning his rifle. Avery crouched behind the old scope, her cheek pressed to the cracked leather rest. Through its lens, the desert heat danced in visible layers. "Wind from your right," she murmured. "About 6, maybe 7 miles per hour. Mirage shows lift near the target. Hold a touch higher." Patel paused, then squeezed the trigger. The bullet rang against steel, dead center. Other pairs missed wide, their high-tech devices struggling to read the shifting thermals. Avery calmly gave Patel his next correction. At 900 meters, he fired again, another center strike. "You saw that with this thing?" he asked, his eyebrows raised in disbelief. Avery only nodded, her eyes scanning for the next shift in the wind. Whispers spread down the line. Recruits glanced from their digital readouts to her weathered instrument. As their own shots scattered, embarrassment flickered across their faces. The drill advanced to 1,050 meters. This time, Avery took the rifle. Patel settled behind his own sleek scope, feeding her data. She listened, but she trusted her eyes more. She watched the grass along a distant ridge, the faint dust spirals near the rocks, the shimmering waves of rising air. She shifted her hold a fraction, ignoring Patel's last call. The rifle cracked. A long pause stretched before the faint clang of steel echoed back across the valley. Bullseye. Silence fell along the line. Voss muttered, "Lucky shot," but his confidence had cracked. A tall, broad-shouldered figure approached from behind. Captain Cole Davenport, the range commander, was known for his cold eye and colder words. He stopped at Avery's station. "Kincaid," he said flatly. "Explain your method." "Observed the mirage and vegetation, sir," she replied, rising to attention. "Predicted the wind layers, sir." "And you ignored the spotter's data?" "Yes, sir." The instruments showed the surface wind. The air above told a different story. Davenport crouched and lifted the old scope. He turned it in his hands, his eyes narrowing. Wiping away grime from the battered brass rim with his thumb, he revealed a nearly invisible etching, 3125 M Delta 1992 verified. His breath hitched. The captain's mask of discipline slipped. He looked at Avery with a sharp, sudden intensity. "Where did you get this?" His voice was low, controlled. "It was my grandfather's, sir," she answered. "Caleb Boone. He gave it to me when I was 12. Recognizing the name, Davenport set the scope down with a reverence that stunned the onlookers. "Report to my office at 1600, he ordered. "Bring the scope." That evening, Avery sat on her bunk, the scope before her. Her fingers traced a seam near the eyepiece that felt uneven. Twisting gently, she heard a soft click. A tiny compartment sprang open. Inside, folded tight, was a slip of yellowed paper. She unfolded it with trembling hands. 3 short lines of faded ink stared back at her. "Trust the wind. Trust yourself. CB." The ridicule of the day vanished. A larger world was looming. The next day, in an office smelling of gun oil and old leather, Avery stood before Captain Davenport and another man, Colonel Martin Keegan. "Kincaid, meet Colonel Keegan," Davenport said. "He knew your grandfather." Keegan leaned forward. "Caleb Boone," he said, the name spoken with reverence. "We called him Harbor Light. Your grandfather wasn't in logistics, Kincaid. He was the best extreme-range marksman we ever had. That engraving on the scope isn't a decoration. It's a record of a mission that we buried under classification. The military doesn't advertise ghosts," Davenport added. Keegan opened a folder stamped with red ink. "This is High Pines," he said, showing her photos of a facility tucked deep in forested mountains. "It's off-map, off-record. It houses Project Emberline, a program for individuals with unusual gifts. Your grandfather's intuition was one such gift. You've shown signs of the same." By dawn, she was on a transport van heading east, the rusted scope secured on her lap. The High Pines facility was a cluster of plain concrete buildings guarded by soldiers with no insignia. A lean, wiry man with eyes as sharp as glass met her. "Master Sergeant Roy Talbot," he grunted. "I trained with Harbor Light. Legacy doesn't pay tuition here." To her surprise, 4 other recruits from her class were there: Ethan Drake, Maya Rohr, Nolan Price, and Aaron Patel. "This is your intake," Talbot barked. "Don't mistake invitation for acceptance." The training was brutal. On diagnostic day, they fired at targets from 650 to 1,550 meters. The others struggled at the furthest distances. Avery was precise up to 1,300 meters, but at 1,550, her shots went wide. "Guess the legacy fizzled," Drake smirked. That night, Avery found Talbot in the compound's memorial garden, a place of unmarked stones. "He came here, too," Talbot said softly. "Boone. Missed his long shots his first week. Just like you. He thought he'd failed. But that failure drove him to create the hush method, a way to still the mind when conditions scream chaos." Back in her quarters, Avery examined the scope again. Her fingers found another hidden catch. A compartment slid open, revealing a strip of faded silk marked with tiny, coded symbols and a small, oilcloth-wrapped notebook. The first page read, "The Hush Method, Field Notes." Inside were diagrams of layered winds, thermal spirals, and notes scrawled in the margins: "Don't silence doubt. Place it aside. Hear the hush, not the noise." The next phase of training was a night exercise in the forest. "The hush method decides who stays," Talbot declared. "Noise will lie to you. Find the stillness." The others, relying on technology, were blind in the dark. Avery lay flat, listening to the world around her, the gurgle of a stream, the whisper of leaves. She centered herself, found the hush, and pressed the trigger. A distant clang confirmed her hit. She repeated it twice more, her shots guided by sound and stillness. The final test was a head-to-head challenge at 1,800 meters. Drake went first, landing one solid hit out of 3. Then Avery stepped up. She laid the silk cloth beside her, tracing its symbols. She closed her eyes, listened for the hush, and fired. The first round was dead center. The second, dead center. The third cracked through the air, followed by the delayed ring of a perfect strike. The range fell silent. That's the hush point, Talbot's voice finally broke the stillness. She found it. Days later, they were in a briefing room. Colonel Keegan laid out a satellite photo of a fortress in the Afghan mountains. Target, Hamid Barzani, he said. Architect of 3 embassy bombings. A drone strike is impossible, he's surrounded by hostages. Your only window is dawn prayer in his courtyard. Range? Avery asked. Patel answered, his voice tight. 3,728 meters. Nearly 2.5 miles. The mission was a blur of night-cloaked helicopters and a grueling mountain climb. From their height, the compound looked like a toy below. As dawn broke, Barzani stepped into the courtyard. Avery centered him in her crosshairs. Just as she prepared to fire, a child darted out, chasing a ball. Avery froze. Not yet, she whispered. The child ran back inside. The courtyard cleared. Barzani unrolled his prayer mat. Patel and Drake whispered data, but Avery set them aside. She laid out the silk strip, traced the symbols, and found the quiet space between the gusts of wind. She exhaled and squeezed the trigger. For 3.9 seconds, the bullet journeyed across the impossible distance. It flew through layered winds and spirals of heat. Through her scope, she saw the impact. Barzani jerked once and collapsed. No alarm, no cry. Silence. Back at High Pines, Keegan presented her with a small wooden box. Inside was a silver medallion, a flame surrounded by mountain peaks. Only 12 of these have ever been awarded, he said. Your grandfather was the first. You are the 12th. He then offered her a new role, operator and instructor. Teach the hush method. Carry it forward. 6 months later, Avery stood on the range at High Pines, instructing a new class of recruits. She set her battered scope on her mat. A young lieutenant, his own gear gleaming, spoke with respectful curiosity. Captain Kincaid, with all due respect, that thing belongs in a museum. Avery smiled faintly, a ghost of her own past in her eyes. So I was told once, she said, sliding the scope toward him. Go ahead. Take a look. The lieutenant peered through the lens, his smirk fading into stunned silence as he saw the world through Harbor Light's eyes, a world of impossible clarity. The silence taught the lesson for her.